The storm had arrived without warning. Dr. Mira Chen pressed her palm against the cool glass of the hospital window and watched sheets of rain hammer the parking lot below. 12 hours into her shift at Riverside Memorial Hospital, her body screamed for rest, but 3 more patients waited in the emergency room. She rolled her shoulders back and returned to the chaos of beeping monitors and urgent voices. By the time she finally clocked out at midnight, the storm had transformed into something dangerous. The radio in her aging Toyota warned of flooding and accidents across the city. Mira knew she should have stayed at the hospital, but her mother expected her for breakfast before flying back to Portland. Their time together was precious and rare. The highway stretched before her like a black ribbon. Rain created rivers across the asphalt, and Mira kept both hands locked on the steering wheel. She had driven this route 1,000 times, knew every curve and exit. The solitude felt peaceful after the constant noise of the emergency room. Then the headlights appeared. They came fast, too fast, weaving between lanes like a silver bullet. Myra's breath caught as the luxury sedan rocketed past her, spraying water across her windshield. She glimpsed the driver through the downpour, a man's profile rigid with concentration or anger, she could not tell which. What happened next unfolded in terrible slow motion. The sedan hit a patch of standing water and hydroplaned. Mira watched the vehicle spin once, twice, the brake lights flashing desperately. The car clipped the concrete barrier with a shower of sparks before flipping over the guardrail and vanishing into the darkness below. Myra's medical training took over before conscious thought could interfere. She jerked her car onto the shoulder, grabbed her emergency kit from the back seat, and ran toward the crash site. Rain soaked through her scrubs instantly, but she barely noticed. Her sneakers slipped on the muddy embankment as she half ran, half slid down toward the wreckage. The sedan lay on its passenger side, steam rising from the crumpled hood. The smell of gasoline hung heavy in the wet air. Myra's heart hammered as she approached the shattered driver's window. A man hung suspended by his seatbelt, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Blood ran down his face from a gash above his left eye, mixing with rain that poured through the broken glass. He looked to be in his mid-30s, wearing what had been an expensive suit now torn and stained. Mira reached through the jagged window opening without hesitation. Glass bit into her forearm, but she ignored the sting and pressed 2 fingers against his neck. The pulse fluttered weakly beneath her touch. Thank God. She pulled out her phone and dialed emergency services while simultaneously assessing his injuries. The dispatcher's calm voice filled her ear as Mira rattled off details with practiced efficiency. Male, mid-30s, head trauma, possible spinal injury, unconscious, vitals weak but present. Highway 52 northbound, mile marker 38. Vehicle rolled, high-speed collision, gasoline leak present. Send ambulance and fire rescue immediately. The man's eyes opened suddenly. They were a striking gray-green, clouded with confusion and pain. He tried to move his head, and Mira placed her hand firmly against his cheek. Do not move. You have been in an accident. I am a doctor. His mouth worked silently for a moment before sound emerged. Who are you? Someone trying to keep you alive, Mira replied sharply. Now be quiet and let me work. She pulled off her jacket and carefully maneuvered it around his neck to provide basic stabilization. The rain made everything slippery, and the smell of gasoline grew stronger. They needed to move fast, but moving him incorrectly could cause paralysis or death. The man's eyes tracked her movements with surprising alertness despite his obvious pain. I do not need help, he managed to say, his voice rough and stubborn. Mira almost laughed at the absurdity. You are hanging upside down in a destroyed car, bleeding from your head, and possibly have internal injuries. Yes, you absolutely need help. I can handle this myself. Really? Mira met his gaze steadily. Then go ahead. Handle it. He tried to move and immediately gasped in pain, his face going white. Mira felt a flash of sympathy mixed with irritation. She had seen this type before, powerful men who believed admitting vulnerability meant weakness. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice dropping into the authoritative tone she used with difficult patience. "You will stay completely still. You will not argue with me. You will do exactly as I say. Because right now, I am the only thing standing between you and serious complications or death. Do you understand?" Something shifted in his eyes. Perhaps it was her tone, or perhaps the reality of his situation finally penetrated his shock. He gave the smallest nod. "Good," Mira said, already moving to check his breathing and circulation. "What is your name?" "Sebastian. Sebastian Cole." "All right, Sebastian. I am Dr. Mira Chen, and you are going to be fine. But you need to trust me." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Mira had never been so grateful to hear that sound. She kept her hand on Sebastian's wrist, monitoring his pulse, while using her other hand to apply pressure to the head wound with gauze from her kit. Sebastian watched her through half-closed eyes. "You are very small to be so bossy." Despite everything, Mira felt her lips twitch. "I am 5'2" of pure determination and medical expertise. Size has nothing to do with it." "I can see that," he murmured. The fire trucks arrived first, their lights painting the scene in red and blue. Paramedics swarmed down the embankment with equipment and a backboard. Mira briefed them quickly while maintaining her position at Sebastian's side. As they carefully extracted him from the vehicle, Sebastian's hand suddenly gripped hers. His eyes locked onto her face with startling intensity. "Thank you," he said simply. Mira squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "Just doing my job." But as the ambulance pulled away with Sebastian inside, Mira stood in the rain and realized her hands were shaking. Not from cold or fear, but from something else entirely. Something about the way he had looked at her in those final moments, like she was the only real thing in his world. She shook her head and climbed back up to her car. It was just adrenaline, nothing more. She would probably never see Sebastian Cole again. She had no idea how wrong she was. 48 hours after the accident, Mira found herself back at Riverside Memorial for another grueling shift. The emergency room pulsed with its usual controlled chaos. A teenager with a suspected broken arm sat in Bay 3, an elderly woman with chest pain occupied Bay 5, and somewhere in the trauma wing, a motorcycle accident victim fought for his life. Mira moved between patients with practiced efficiency, her small frame weaving through nurses and residents. She had learned long ago that being petite meant working twice as hard to command respect in the medical field. Her clipboard held a dozen charts, each one representing a life depending on her skills and judgment. "Dr. Chen," a voice called from the nurse's station. Nurse Paula waved her over with an expression that made Mira immediately suspicious. "There is a situation in the VIP wing." Mira frowned. "I do not have any patients in VIP today." Paula leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Sebastian Cole. The real estate developer. He was admitted 2 days ago after a highway accident. Someone pulled him out of his car and saved his life. Apparently, he has been asking for you by name." The memory hit Mira like a physical force. Those gray-green eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw even while bleeding and trapped. She had pushed the incident to the back of her mind, buried it under 50 other emergencies and the relentless pace of hospital life. "Why does he want to see me?" Paula's eyes widened. "You really do not know who Sebastian Cole is? He owns half the commercial real estate in the state. The Cole Properties empire. He is worth hundreds of millions." Mira felt something cold settle in her stomach. Good for him. Tell him I will stop by when I have a free moment. But Nurse Paula grabbed her arm gently. "Mira, he has been asking every hour since he woke up yesterday. He is being discharged this afternoon. I think he really wants to thank you." Mira glanced at her watch. She had 15 minutes before her next patient arrived. Fine. But I cannot stay long. The VIP wing existed in a different universe from the rest of the hospital. The halls were quieter, the lighting softer, the artwork actually worth looking at. Mira had been up here only a handful of times, usually consulting on cases too complex for the regular physicians. Room 312 had double doors. Mira knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Sebastian Cole sat propped against pillows that probably cost more than her monthly salary. He wore dark pajamas that looked tailored, and a white bandage stretched across his forehead where she had seen blood streaming 2 nights ago. His face was bruised, a spectacular purple and yellow pattern across his left cheekbone, but his eyes were alert and focused entirely on her. "Dr. Chen," he said, and something in his voice made her spine straighten. "I have been waiting for you. Mr. Cole." Mira approached the bed with professional detachment. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." He shifted, wincing slightly. "The doctors tell me I am lucky to be alive. Lucky you happened to drive past. Lucky you knew what to do. I am glad you are recovering." Mira pulled out a penlight and moved to check his pupils, but Sebastian caught her wrist gently. His touch was warm, firm but not forceful. "Wait," he said. "I need to do something first." He released her wrist and reached for a folder on the bedside table. His movements were careful, obviously still painful. When he opened the folder, Mira saw official-looking documents with her name printed across the top. "What is this?" "A gift." Sebastian's expression was difficult to read. "A token of my gratitude. I have arranged for a new vehicle to be delivered to you. A Mercedes SUV, silver, fully loaded. Your Honda has served its time, I think." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mira stared at the papers, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. "Excuse me? It is the least I can do." Sebastian appeared genuinely pleased with himself. "I also had my assistant research your student loan debt. I have arranged for full payment of the remaining balance. Consider it handled." Something dangerous ignited in Myra's chest. She set down her penlight with deliberate care and took a step closer to his bed. Despite her small stature, something in her presence made Sebastian's confident smile falter. "Mr. Cole," she began, her voice quiet and absolutely lethal. "I am going to explain something to you very clearly, and I want you to listen with the same attention you would give to a diagnosis that could save your life." Sebastian opened his mouth, but Mira held up one finger and he fell silent. "I did not save your life so that you could buy me things. I saved your life because I am a doctor and that is what doctors do. I did not pull you from that wreck thinking about rewards or payments or how grateful you would be. I did it because a human being was dying and I had the skills to help. But I just wanted to show my appreciation." Sebastian tried again. "No." Myra's eyes flashed. "You wanted to turn a human moment into a transaction. You wanted to put a price tag on compassion so you could file it away and move on with your life. You wanted to make yourself feel less uncomfortable about needing help. That is not fair. Is it not?" Mira crossed her arms. "Tell me, Mr. Cole, when was the last time someone did something for you without expecting anything in return? When was the last time you could not solve a problem by throwing money at it?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this." Mira moved to the window, looking out at the city below. "Do you know what I see every day in the emergency room? I see people who cannot afford their medications choosing between rent and insulin. I see families bankrupted by medical bills. I see human beings reduced to numbers on insurance forms. And you think you can just wave your checkbook and make my compassion something you purchased? I never meant it that way." "Then how did you mean it?" Mira turned back to face him. "Because from where I stand, you have insulted everything I believe in." My compassion is not for sale. My medical care is not a commodity you can acquire. I do not want your money, your cars, or your gratitude if it comes with a dollar sign attached. The silence that followed felt heavy and charged. Sebastian stared at her with an expression she could not quite decipher. Hurt, perhaps. Or shock. Maybe both. You are right, he said finally, his voice rough. Nobody talks to me like this anymore. Maybe nobody ever has. Maybe they should, Mira replied, but her tone had softened slightly. She recognized that look now, the confusion of someone whose entire worldview had just been challenged. Sebastian leaned back against his pillows, suddenly looking exhausted. I do not know how to do this, he admitted. How to just say thank you without it being a transaction. Everything in my life is a transaction. Then learn, Mira said simply. Start by tearing up those papers. He did, slowly, and the sound of ripping documents filled the room. When he finished, he looked at her again. Thank you, Dr. Chen. For saving my life. For expecting nothing in return. For treating me like a human being instead of a bank account. Mira felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the armor she had built around her heart. You are welcome, Mr. Cole. Now rest and actually follow your discharge instructions this time. Your body needs to heal. She moved toward the door, but Sebastian's voice stopped her. Will I see you again? Mira paused with her hand on the door handle. Only if you end up in my emergency room again, which I sincerely hope you do not. What if I wanted to see you outside the hospital? The question hung in the air between them. Mira looked back at him, this powerful man in his expensive pajamas, bruised and vulnerable and somehow more real than he had probably been in years. That would not be appropriate, she said softly. You are my patient. I am being discharged in 3 hours. Then I will not be your patient anymore. Mira felt her heart beat faster. This was dangerous territory, crossing lines she had never crossed before. Sebastian Cole existed in a different world, one of wealth and privilege she could never understand. They had nothing in common except one rainy night when his arrogance had nearly killed him and her compassion had saved him. But something in his eyes made her pause. A loneliness that mirrored her own, perhaps. A hunger for something genuine in a life built on transactions. Ask me again when you are no longer my patient, she heard herself say. Then we will see. She left before he could respond, her heart pounding as she walked back through the quiet halls of the VIP wing. What had she just done? She did not date patients, did not get involved with wealthy men who thought the world revolved around their checkbooks. But Sebastian Cole had torn up those papers when she asked. Had admitted vulnerability in a way that clearly terrified him. Had looked at her like she was something precious and rare instead of just another doctor doing her job. Mira returned to the emergency room where a new patient waited, a construction worker with a nail embedded in his hand. She fell back into the rhythm of her work, but part of her mind stayed in that VIP room, wondering what would happen next. 3 weeks passed before Mira saw Sebastian Cole again. She had almost convinced herself that their encounter meant nothing, that he had forgotten about her the moment he left the hospital. Men like Sebastian did not pursue women like her. They dated socialites and models, women who fit seamlessly into their glittering world of charity galas and exclusive restaurants. Mira threw herself into work with renewed intensity. Double shifts became her norm, sleeping at the hospital more nights than she slept at home. Her mother called weekly from Portland, worry evident in every word, but Mira insisted everything was fine. Work was her refuge, the one place where she felt truly competent and in control. Then the flowers arrived. The first bouquet appeared at the nurse's station on a Tuesday morning. Not roses, which would have been too obvious, but wildflowers in shades of purple and yellow. The card read simply, "Thank you for seeing me as human. SC." Mira stared at the arrangement, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Nurse Paula appeared at her elbow with a knowing smile. "Someone has an admirer," Paula said with a grin. "It is just gratitude," Mira replied firmly, but her fingers traced the edge of the card. The next day brought a donation. Sebastian Cole had given $2 million to Riverside Memorial's emergency department, specifically earmarked for patients who could not afford their medical bills. The hospital administrator called Mira into his office personally to thank her. Apparently Sebastian had mentioned she inspired the gift. Mira did not know whether to be touched or furious. This was exactly what she had told him not to do, and yet he had found a way around her objections. The money would help hundreds of people, and she could not argue with that, even if his methods frustrated her. On Friday, Sebastian himself appeared. Mira was suturing a laceration on a teenager's arm when Nurse Paula poked her head into the examination room. "Dr. Chen, there is someone in the waiting area asking for you. Says it is personal." Mira finished the last stitch and gave the teenager instructions for wound care before washing her hands and stepping into the hallway. Through the window to the waiting area, she spotted Sebastian immediately. He stood near the vending machines looking completely out of place in his tailored charcoal suit. The bruises had faded from his face, leaving only a thin scar above his eyebrow as evidence of the accident. He held 2 coffee cups and appeared to be studying the motivational posters on the wall with intense concentration. Myra's first instinct was to turn around and pretend she had not seen him. Her second instinct, the one she actually followed, was to march into the waiting room with her most professional expression firmly in place. "Mr. Cole," she said crisply. "This is unexpected." Sebastian turned and something lit up in his eyes when he saw her. "Dr. Chen. I brought coffee." He held out one of the cups. "I remembered you said you worked long shifts." Mira wanted to refuse on principle, but the rich aroma of genuine, expensive coffee was too tempting after 12 hours of hospital sludge. She accepted the cup with a small nod. "Thank you. Though you did not need to come all the way here." "I wanted to see you," Sebastian said simply. "You told me to ask again when I was no longer your patient. It has been 3 weeks." "I am working," Mira replied, taking a sip of the coffee. It was perfect, somehow exactly how she liked it. "How did you know?" Sebastian had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have asked Nurse Paula. She is very helpful when you donate to the hospital." "Of course." Mira felt a smile threatening despite her best efforts. "You cannot just buy information about me." "I am not buying anything." Sebastian stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I am trying to get to know you. There is a difference." A patient called out from one of the examination rooms, and Mira glanced toward the sound. "I really do need to get back to work." "Have dinner with me," Sebastian said quickly. "Please. 1 meal. If you hate it, I promise I will never bother you again." Mira studied his face, looking for the arrogance she had seen that rainy night. Instead, she found only genuine hope mixed with vulnerability. This was not the man who had tried to buy her gratitude with a car. This was someone who had been changed by nearly dying, someone who was trying, however clumsily, to connect with another human being. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "But somewhere normal. No private dining rooms or restaurants with dress codes. And you pay for yourself." Sebastian's smile transformed his entire face. "Deal. Tomorrow night? I know a place." The place turned out to be a small Thai restaurant in the International District, the kind with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting and absolutely incredible food. Mira arrived directly from her shift, still wearing scrubs under her jacket, and found Sebastian already seated at a corner table. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "This is perfect," Mira said as she slid into the chair across from him. "How did you find it?" "I asked my assistant where she eats when she wants real food," Sebastian admitted. "Apparently I have been missing out on the best parts of the city." They ordered pad thai and green curry and spring rolls, and somewhere between the appetizers and main course, Mira felt her walls beginning to lower. Sebastian asked about her work with genuine interest, listening intently as she described the challenges and rewards of emergency medicine. He did not interrupt or try to fix her problems, just listened. In return, he told her about growing up in his father's shadow, building coal properties from a small firm into an empire while losing himself in the process. The accident had forced him to confront how empty his life had become, how every relationship was transactional, how he could not remember the last time someone had challenged him the way Mira had. "You terrified me that night in the hospital," Sebastian admitted over jasmine tea. "Nobody has ever called me out like that. Nobody has ever looked past the money and success to see how lost I actually was. I saw a man trying to buy his way out of uncomfortable feelings," Mira said gently. "I have been poor my entire life, Sebastian. I worked 3 jobs to get through college. My mother cleaned offices so I could have books. Money has never been something I could use to solve problems, so I learned to solve them other ways. With determination and compassion and hard work. I want to learn that," Sebastian said quietly. "I want to be the kind of person who does not need to buy connection. Who can just be present with another human being." Mira reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was the first time she had touched him since that rainy night, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. "You are already learning. Coming here, asking questions, listening. These are not things the Sebastian I met in that hospital room would have done. Because you changed me," Sebastian turned his hand over so their palms pressed together. "You saved my life twice. Once on that highway and once when you refused to let me reduce what happened to a transaction." The restaurant was closing around them, chairs being stacked on tables, but neither of them moved. They sat in that corner booth talking until the owner gently suggested they continue their conversation elsewhere. They walked through the quiet streets of the International District, past closed shops and sleeping restaurants. Mira told Sebastian about her mother, about growing up in a tiny apartment where love was measured in sacrifices rather than gifts. Sebastian shared stories about board meetings and business deals, but also about loneliness and the weight of expectations. When they reached Myra's car, Sebastian hesitated. "Can I see you again?" Mira looked up at him, this tall man who had been brought low by circumstance and was rebuilding himself into something better. "Yes. But slowly. I need to know this is real." "It is real," Sebastian promised. "More real than anything in my life has been in years." He did not try to kiss her, did not push for more. He simply squeezed her hand once and watched as she drove away. Over the following weeks, they built something neither of them had expected. Sebastian showed up at the hospital with coffee during Myra's breaks. Mira dragged him to food trucks and neighborhood cafes where the meals cost less than $20. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering shared loves of old movies and jazz music and rainy afternoons. Sebastian began volunteering at a free clinic in the Central District, using his business skills to help with administration and fundraising. Mira watched him interact with patients who had nothing to offer but gratitude and saw the transformation continue. He was learning to measure his worth in human connection rather than dollar signs. 2 months after their first real date, Sebastian's past caught up with them. A business deal went sour, accusations of fraud filled the newspapers, and suddenly Sebastian faced the possibility of losing everything he had built. Mira found him sitting on a bench outside the hospital at midnight, his face buried in his hands. She sat beside him without speaking, simply pressing her shoulder against his. After a long moment, Sebastian lifted his head. "I might lose it all," he said hoarsely. "The company, the reputation, everything." "And?" Mira asked gently. Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "And I realized I do not care as much as I thought I would. Because the most important thing in my life cannot be taken away by lawyers or business rivals or bad press." Mira felt tears prick her eyes. What is the most important thing? You, Sebastian said simply. This. What we have built together. You taught me that wealth is not measured in bank accounts. That success is not defined by what you own. That the richest life is one filled with genuine connection and purpose. Mira leaned her head against his shoulder. We will get through this. Whatever happens. I know, Sebastian wrapped his arm around her. Because I finally understand what matters. Not the penthouse or the cars or the empire. Just this. Just you. Just being the kind of man worthy of someone as extraordinary as you. They sat together on that bench as the city slept around them, two people from different worlds who had found something neither expected. A connection forged in crisis and strengthened by honesty. A love built not on transactions but on transformation. Sebastian Cole had owned everything and felt empty. Mira Chen had owned almost nothing but felt rich in purpose. Together, they discovered that the greatest wealth was not something you could buy or own. It was something you built, one honest moment at a time, with someone brave enough to see past the surface to the struggling, hoping, human heart beneath. The accident that had nearly killed Sebastian had given him something far more valuable than his life. It had given him a chance to truly live. The end.